Hi, yes, my name is Claudia. So what our company is doing is we are actually developing plant sensing technology and, oh, sorry, and also AI-based plant analysis, but in fact, consumer facing. So it's interesting that I'm actually in this panel because I thought I would be in the business panel today, but here I am. Why am I here? I'm here because a lot of the conversation that's currently happening when it comes to the legal cannabis industry is actually focusing on the cultivation or retail space. And one of the very big things or massive untapped opportunities that are being missed out in this conversation is actually cannabis homegrowing. So cannabis cultivation or homegrown cultivation is actually part of most of the cannabis legalizations, no matter whether it's in the United States or in Europe. So it pretty much goes along the lines of recreational cannabis legalization. So for instance, in the United States, cannabis home cultivation is legal in 24 out of 50 states. These tend to be like the exact same states where also recreational cannabis is legalized. There's only like one state where you can recreationally consume but are not allowed to grow. But in Germany, for instance, very interesting, like whereas like the recreational consumption is legalized, you cannot actually purchase cannabis in Germany. So, but home cultivation is legalized up to 3 plants in households. Which is like a very interesting approach to cannabis legalization in general. But it also seems to be the trend in Europe that most countries do have some difficulties in fully commercializing cannabis. It seems to be widely accepted that it needs to be like legalized in the medicinal space, that you can actually buy it in pharmacies. But when it comes to recreational use, most European countries really do have trouble in drafting laws that would support that. However, home cultivation is actually something that seems to be widely accepted, like even if commercialization is not, which especially in Germany, but even in the United States, leads to a development of a very interesting market. So we have like first data coming from the United States, which is like very interesting. So a couple of years after legalization in these states, like over 3 million of Americans actually grow their cannabis at home. And these people tend to spend a lot of money on their newfound hobbies. So typically like up to $1,000 a year, which is quite a bit. And in Germany, also like very interesting, is like weeks after the law was promulgated, there were like a couple of studies that indicated that almost 10% of all adults in Germany would be interested or curious about actually growing cannabis at home, irrespective, and that's like the funny thing, whether they're actually consuming regularly or not. So this sort of like implies that in Germany, we are talking about potentially, even under very conservative estimates, that a market could emerge over the next 1 or 2 years. There could be worth like around €1 billion annually. And overall, in the United States, you already have like a spending in the home growing space that is around $3 billion, and it's actually expected to grow up to $38 over the next couple of years. So in fact, that is actually quite an interesting market. It is of course only a fraction of the overall cannabis market, and it seems to be small, but also you have like fewer players who are in this market. And this actually creates like a lot of opportunity. Cannabis growers are actually are not the ones who you think there are. In fact, there are you in terms of demographic. So they tend to have a relatively stable lifestyle. So over 65% of home growers are actually above 35 years old, and many even skew older. They are married or in a relationship, and they typically have children at home. So they're also quite affluent. So on average, they actually earn more than $50,000 a year, and a quarter of them even earn more than $100,000. And that's like a very American number, of course. Like in Europe, that's probably skewed a little bit lower. But what is also like very similar to the United States, these people tend to be already very gardening affine. So for them, growing cannabis at home is merely an extension of a hobby that they're already exercising. And what is also like really interesting, especially if you're trying to market towards cannabis home growers, is that many of them, like over half of them, do not associate themselves with the cannabis subculture, if you want. So they tend to be actually much more mainstream, and they also frequent more mainstream supply stores. For instance, they do tend to buy their supplies in regular hardware stores. And this is another thing, they don't necessarily grow to save money. Saving money seems to be like a motivation that is quite widespread in the United States, especially in the medicinal space, where you tend to still, where the prices are still quite high. But in Germany, for instance, saving money is not like the primary motivation. In fact, people are much more motivated because they can either grow or because they believe they can grow better quality. And in Germany, in fact, it's also like because they do appreciate the variety that they can grow, even though, for instance, cannabis producers are offering a wide variety of cannabis strains. The cannabis seed producers are much faster in offering like new varieties, actually faster than the producers can respond. And you do have like now sort of like an emerging trend of cannabis connoisseurs. I always say cannabis is a new wine. So it's starting to become a trend, where people really talk about different strains and how they taste, and and also sort of like exchange their produce in the private sphere. So this is like a very interesting trend. So in this respect, I truly believe that cannabis home growing will always be complementary to the regular cannabis commercialization. Also, many actually do it because it's much more convenient than to look around and hunt for certain strains. But the overarching motivation of why people actually grow is because it's a lot of fun. So they really truly enjoy it. So it is a hobby, and it needs to be a hobby because cannabis home growers spend a lot of time in growing cannabis, so typically around 30 to 60 minutes a day, or actually 3 to 6 hours a week. So it's quite a time-consuming hobby for them as well. What is also like very important, like if you're trying to market towards home growers, is that home growers, this new generation of home growers specifically, has very little experience. Like in the United States, for instance, 84% of all cannabis growers have 2 or less years of experience, so they don't know what they're doing. In West Europe, especially here in Germany, like most people actually live in homes that are not conducive to growing cannabis, not even in the outdoor space, right? So they need to have like the right equipment to be able to grow. And that's also very important. Like 65% of cannabis growers are struggling to find the right products. They just simply do not know what type of products, what type of grow tech, or what type of seeds or soil, etc. they need in order to start growing. So how can you unlock the potential of cannabis home growing? So whatever you are doing in this space, education and knowledge transfer is absolute key in addressing home growers. So you can actually not market a product without, provide like knowledge along the lines. And what I find actually even much more important is that cannabis brands need to learn to be more mainstream. So what do I mean with that? It's like several things. So one of the things is that they need to come out of their niche. So they need to bring like the products into places where they do find the mainstream customers, for instance, the DIY stores. They shouldn't leave it to the gardening companies, that currently exist to absorb the space. But also they need to package, for instance, like the products in a way that is more attractive to the mainstream customers, right? So much more, let's say, less loud. And less direct, especially if you consider that many of the cannabis home growers do have children, so you don't want to have like products lying around that has packaging that is too obvious. So another thing, and also what's actually quite interesting, if you are not a cannabis brand that is currently like marketing towards a consumer, but you're in the B2B space, say you're a seed producer and you would love to go into the consumer space, you may want to look for companies that are already sitting in the mainstream, like for instance gardening companies or gardening retailers that you can maybe cooperate with to sell to the consumer space. So you can actually start creating your brands in cooperation with brands that are already sitting in the gardening space. Another thing that I also always say is that as a cannabis brand, you need to start experimenting with new business models, because the threshold to actually enter into that hobby is quite high. So typically, like even the setup cost for like cannabis indoor growing is anywhere between 600 and 1,000 or 1,200 euros. So this is a lot of money that you sunk in even before you even know whether or not you like that hobby, or if you're actually good at it, right? So many people don't start because they're for them it appears to be like quite a heavy investment to get in. So here it would be great if, especially like when it comes to grow tech, the providers would start, or the retailers would start to maybe experiment with models that go more into equipment rental or leasing, so that people can maybe test like the grow tents and the grow technology that they have, and then maybe later on actually buy it if they appreciate it or can return it. So the sector in general needs new business models around that. What are we doing to market to cannabis growers? So what we are doing at FYTA is that we are actually developing like small little fitness trackers for plants. This is our first product. It's a multi-parameter sensor that measures like all sorts of relevant parameters that are typically also using or monitoring in the cultivation space. But we are packaging it to into a very low-cost product and market it to gardeners and home growers alike. So this is our first product, but we're actually working on 3 more. So it's like small little fitness trackers that you can attach either on top of the plant or into the soil, and that measure different parameters. And the most interesting thing is that we are taking this data and then we analyze this with the support of artificial intelligence. So we are actually telling people exactly what this data means and what the plant needs. And then we are sending them messages via push notifications to let them know that the plants need something. When they come into our app, they will find a lot of analysis, and we will teach them how to take care of the plants. So they find grow guides and instructions, and we also tell them which products they can use, and we sell them directly in the app. So it's sort of like an all-in-one solution in our app that you can find to get know-how, inspiration, support, products, and eventually also community. The interesting thing is that we also have like a B2B angle. So because we are a marketplace, or we are trying to present a marketplace in our app, we are also looking for other cannabis brands to work with. And here we are actually offering a very high converting sales platform. So for instance, our users are interacting like 25% of our users are actually interacting with our app like every day. So it's like as if they're reading a newsletter every day. So, and we have like a click sales conversion of over 8%, which is really very high, even in the e-commerce space. And so we can actually build like a very high converting marketplace in our app that is also like highly personalized. So we're actually showing our users no products that are not relevant to them. In fact, like depending on the plants that you have in the app, because we are also catering towards regular gardening consumers, if you, for instance, do not add a cannabis plant to the app, you will never see any cannabis-related content. On the other hand, if you do add cannabis, we will show you cannabis-related content, but also like content that typically also relates to the problems that you have with the plants, or the growth stage that you're in. So this is how we are keeping the platform alive. We also own currently the most powerful technology, or data technology, in the home gardening space. I mean, we are collecting a mass of products, of data. So there actually isn't anything that we do not know about our customers. We know exactly like how the plants are doing. I mean, we have a plant species recognition in the app, but we also have a plant disease recognition in the app. So we can cross-check whether the plant is healthy or not. But we also get a lot of in-app user data, and we also get user interaction data. So we actually do know also like how our users are interacting with their plants. And obviously we also have contextual data. So with all of this data that we have, we are actually truly able to provide, to optimize the user experience for our users in the app and to personalize it. In the future, what we would like to do is that we would like to evolve into an open platform for smart gardening with many entry points for cooperations with other brands. So I talked about like the 3 new products that we are currently developing and that we will be launching this year. So this will include like a fitness tracker for the outdoor space, which is gateway independent. We have like a mini sensor that will be even cheaper than the one that we currently have, and that will only like measure like soil, but that will also be capable to measure in hydro. And we have what we call now the FYTA Sphere, which is a small little clip that you can attach on top of the plant that measures like environmental data like light, air moisture, and temperature, and analyze it together. But the idea is that over time, we are actually integrating with different other grow techs. So in the outdoor space, this would be, for instance, watering system. In the indoor space, especially when it comes to home growing, with grow tents or lightning solutions. Yeah, so this is it. Thank you.